champ is here. I must be the greatest. The champ is here.
I'm going to continue to stand with the people.
The champ is here.
I will not lose.
I'm a bad man. I shook up the world.
Yes, welcome. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you were here with we. My name is EJ, and I got my man.
MH.
Yes, he is the DB of the show. So from one DB to another, hey, we're bringing the best professionals in the game and in the boardroom here, laughing at all, talk about it all, but while giving a platform to be heard. So you know what we do about this time, and we just bring him right on in. So we want to welcome our guest to the show, right? So he is born in the motherland. Our guest went from being an Indian to a cowboy. All right, so he's a son, a husband, a father, you know, a girl dad, you know, and a boy dad. But you know, shout out to the girl dads here. We got MH is definitely a girl dad, but he lives a life of service, man. So and understands the power of sport. So we'll definitely get into that. But now he's a FinTech disruptor. And he's bringing you the next level of fandom. So please clap it up for our founder, our co-founder of Vestible, Yves Batoba. I think I got that right, man.
Hey, you got it right. EJ,
awesome,
MH.
man.
Thank you both, man. Appreciate you having me on.
Oh, man, it's a pleasure to have you on. So we're going to jump right in. We like to ask all our guests a shoot your shot moment. All right, so this could have been in the past. It could have been in, you know, something more current. But just a quick shoot your shot moment where you won or you learned a lesson.
Where you want to learn your lesson, I tell you, man, one of the biggest things that I've learned just in life in general is man, do not, and by the way, let me just take a step back and let you know, like, faith is a huge part of my life, right? So my faith is a huge part of my life, and you can go ahead and make the plans that you want, right? Go ahead and have your 10-year plan, your 20-year plan, your 30-year plan. Make sure that you leave enough room for God to be able to disrupt those plans. That's been my biggest thing, man, from senior year of college to saying, God, I'm just going to give my career to you. I don't know how this thing is going to work out, all the way to, you know, as of late, whenever I, because of a pandemic, left the Miami Dolphins whenever I was there, you know, just four years ago, and moved into an area that I never thought that I would be in, but really because of divine intervention, you know, here I am. So that's my biggest thing, man. That's my biggest shot, is just saying, like, hey, I'm gonna lay this all out, but God, I'm gonna submit this all to you.
Amen, man. Where's your love for sports start?
Love for sport, man. Let me tell you what. So my family, we came here from the Democratic Republic of Congo, right? I was born in Zaire, which is a country that no longer exists, but it changed its name. The interesting thing is, whenever you are an immigrant, you come here to the United States, your parents want you to focus on your education, right? And they want you to become a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, or you're a disgrace to the family. You know, those are your options. But I get here, I didn't know anything about sports. I'm not paying attention to anything. It's politics, it's education. I didn't even know that you could get a scholarship to go play collegiately. So I remember my neighbor actually came up to me one day. We're outside riding bikes here in Keller, Texas. And he goes, "Hey, you trying out for the football team?" I'm like, "I don't know. Like, should I?" He goes, "Yeah, you're pretty fast, man. You should go be a running back. You should try being a running back." Okay. So that's how it started. You know, that's really how it started in the 7th grade. And, you know, once you grow up in Texas, you really learn that it's a religion. You know, it ain't just any casual sport. It's a religion. The entire town shuts down for Friday night lights. And once you get immersed in that type of culture, you have no choice but to fall in love with it, man. So that's really how it began.
I love it. And ain't nothing like Texas football. Well, according to my pops is from Greenville, Texas. So
okay,
I didn't get a chance to grow up in Texas. I grew up in Colorado, but he talked noise for me still about Texas football. So give me the feeling that first time putting on the pads. Texas.
Oh
football.
Man, first time putting on the pads, bro. I had no idea what I was doing. Matter of fact, I was terrible. Like, I was when I say terrible, I was really bad, guys. I had no hands, couldn't catch to save my life. So I played running back and I played safety. And I probably led the state of Texas in dropped interceptions. Like, that's all it was. And it was actually a coach of mine that introduced me just to the power of visioning, like just envisioning the things that I was going to do on the football field. And he said, "Hey, for you, find one thing that you want to do really well." For me, it was just catching the football. So he would tell me the day before the game, just sit down in a dark room and with as much detail as possible. Picture yourself running, picture the ball coming in, looking the ball all the way in with your hands. Like you have to do that over and over again. And that is actually what led to me becoming better at catching the football. So, visualization, man, visualization works. But yeah, I sucked, man. I couldn't play football worth a lick. And I really didn't even understand the sport until I got to college.
So how do we get to the Democratic of Congo, to Gaylord, Texas, right? Like, how did that become the location for your family?
It's a long story, but I'm going to make it short. So there was a war that had broke out between Rwanda, between Congo, but really within Congolese people. And because of that war that had broke out, it was really near to where my family and I were staying. And because of that, there was we really were in a tumultuous situation to where we had to decide, hey, do we want to stay here and risk our lives, right? High probability that we were actually going to die, or do we want to try to escape and live somewhere else? We made the decision to leave. A family friend of ours came and ended up navigating us through the actual war zone, like the actual battlegrounds. So while bullets are flying over our heads, we're military crawling, right? So on our elbows and our knees, getting through there. I'm 6 years old at the time, but I still remember bodies dropping, like around me. And through miles and miles and miles of walking, we end up getting to a Catholic church where we stayed as refugees for a little bit. And from that Catholic church, after staying there overnight, we were able to get on a boat across the Congo River. Eventually got to the airport to where we were able to fly, my family and I, from Congo down to South Africa. South Africa lived as refugees, but we had a terrible experience in South Africa because we lived in an area where the white folks didn't want us because we weren't black, right? Because we were black, right? This is post-apartheid South Africa. Nelson Mandela's president. And the black folks didn't necessarily want us around because we weren't South African, right? It's a very tribal thing. So after, my little brother getting death threats, our house getting broken into, not having any friends at school, my mom getting beat, right? Black eye, fat lip and everything. We were like, yeah, we got to get up out of here. We had an uncle that lived in Dallas, and we made the decision that we were going to move to Dallas, Texas. And I wrote about this all in my book, Immigrant America, but that's how we got to Texas through my uncle who lived in the DFW area.
Amazing.
That's a really short version of the story, man, because we almost didn't even get to fly out because my dad was on a no-fly list because he was helping Rwandese people escape the country. So we had to have another family in another country send us fake passports, got to the U.S., applied for political asylum, told them everything that happened with the fake passports, sent the passports back, and then we were granted asylum when we got to the United States. So the whole story is pretty nuts.
And we definitely gonna get into that when we talk about your book and later on. Go ahead.
Yeah, for sure. But even a little bit about you spent time in Texas, obviously. Texas is almost like its own country within this country. So what was the ingratiating yourself into whatever Texas is? How was that process?
Yeah, man. You walk around Texas, you see more Texas flags than you see U.S. flags.
Right.
And then it wasn't until I left Texas that I realized that I was actually brainwashed to love Texas more than I love the United States. But no, it's definitely its own thing, man. You get here, and I didn't speak the language. I get here. I'm in the second grade. I'm that exchange student. I have to take ESL classes, so English is a second language. And I'm just trying to learn, man. And, kids are cruel. So I'm hearing every joke in the book, man. Every single joke you can hear, I'm hearing all of it. And because of that, because I couldn't express myself with my words, the only way that I knew how to express myself was physically. So I got in a lot of fights, probably from ages like 7 to about 10 years old, just got in fights all the time. And until I got fluent, right? I was finally fluent in English when I was around 9 years old. But, tough adjustment. But with that being said, just my family structure never let me get too far out there, right? There was a good foundation at home that always allowed me to bring it in. But it's an interesting situation whenever home feels like Africa, right? Because of the smell, because of the food, because of the peppers and the spices, because of the language that's spoken, everything. And we had a great Congolese community in Irving, Texas, whenever we moved there. But then everything outside of the walls of your home feels like a foreign country. So it was a weird dichotomy of having to live those two lives. But overall, it shapes who you are. And whenever you actually get to stop and reflect on your entire experience, I think it allows for purpose in your life.
Now, did sports help, kind of that transition when you started getting more into that? Like, was that kind of outlet, or did that just come later in life?
Yeah, I think one thing that sports was definitely good for is, you have people really from, all kinds of backgrounds, all kinds of upbringings that come together for something that's bigger than themselves. And, whenever I had, but the majority of my friends growing up were Mexican, right? So you got my Mexican homeboys who are coming back home with me, and they're looking at fufu and macayabu and fumbo and all these different foods. And they're like, what am I supposed to do with this? I'm like, yo, you just got to try it. No, don't use the fork and the knife. You got to use your hands. What are you doing? So ingratiating them to all different kinds of cultures. And then whenever I go over to their houses, right, my teammates' houses, it's like, all right, here we got some, some different types of foods, right? You got authentic Mexican cuisine, right? So I think those different blends of cultures, especially within the area where I grew up, it really allowed for a diverse friend group and a diverse worldview.
Yeah, that perspective early, like my parents were military, so I didn't. I grew up. I was born in Japan, lived in Korea. When I was in college, they lived in Turkey. So I always thought the education of just seeing different people and how different people live and adjusting. We have a lot. Like Kamala Harris always says this. We have a lot more similar than we have not similar in some cases as 100%. Well. So how was that? I mean, I know. Ingratiating yourself to different cultures and everything like that. What did you find that was super similar to some of your friends early on that was similar to you?
Yeah. What's funny is I was actually just having a conversation with my sister about this the other day. It's cultural competency, I think, is one of the biggest things that you realize. Some people will call it code switching whenever you're coming up, but I get code switching, right? But to me, it's cultural competency, because whenever we got here I am, we're living in the inner city, right, at first. And then we moved to the suburbs, and then eventually to like a town that's more rural and more country, right? So you have to know how to navigate through all those different environments. And I think especially whenever you come from a past that was so violent towards you and towards your family, you have to know how to, what's the word I'm looking for? You don't want to make any situation worse than it actually is, right? And I think with immigrant parents too, like there's always like this fear, like, hey, we don't want our kid to get in trouble and then we have to get sent back. Because I didn't become a U.S. citizen until 2010, right? So I've only been African American for 14 years, but I've been Black my entire life. So that's an interesting thing about it. But whenever you meet people from different cultures, you all go through a lot of the same things as far as the emotions, family struggles. Especially whenever you meet other immigrants, you realize that there's a certain level of pressure that is placed on, whether it's an Asian person or, somebody who came here from the Caribbeans or somebody who came in from Africa, right? There's a different type of pressure, I believe, that is placed on the children of immigrants. So those are some of the commonalities that we were definitely able to share.
Now take it back to high school, man, playing in Texas, man. You guys so looked up the stadium, like y'all play football for real. How was it like, playing for a team? Because I think, and I don't know when the stadium, I was doing some quick research, but what did you play in the newer stadium, or that did come after you graduated? Like my high school did that to me. They got a brand new high school right after I graduated.
Yeah, the Keller Indians, man. Everything got better after we left. That's just how it goes, man. Everything gets better after you leave.
You lay the foundation, right? Because like looking at the stadium, like seating 8,000 people and stuff like that, man. Yeah. And they do it really, as they say, big in Texas, man. So a lot of that happened after you left, you said?
Yeah. Well, I tell you, we did have 7,000 people that would show up to our games. And Keller High School, man, there's, it's a long tradition. There was at one point we were, like a powerhouse program. During the years that I was there, we had to try to get back to the glory days. So we had a little bit of a drought. My senior year, we ended up going 7-3, right? So we're finally bringing the program back to where it was. And honestly, man, like I had never worked for anything as hard as I did the summer before my senior year of football, just kind of going into that season and the way you're training. And I ended up, running a fast 40 and being the fastest player on the team. And, all these things happen and you realize, man, I just care. Like I just care so much. And you go into that season, the players were the ones that led it. I think some of the best teams aren't where the coaches are the ones that are actually setting the rules and telling everybody what to do, but it's the players coming together and saying, hey, if we're going to do what we need to do, like we have to be the cohesive unit. So the leaders of the team came together and we came up with this rule called DFU, which just meant it stood for don't F up. Right. And we all knew what that meant. You know, you're talking about, partying, getting in trouble, girls, like all that stuff, like just don't F up, especially like just during the fall. Like we got something that we're actually trying to accomplish here. And we had some great leaders. I think we had 7 guys on that team that ended up going D1, which really hadn't happened in a long time. For Keller High School class of 2008, 9, and 10. So we go 7-3. It was a 3-way tie within our district. The last game of the season, we're playing our crosstown rival, which is Fossil Ridge High School. And that rivalry was ranked like the 7th best rivalry in the state of Texas or something like that, right? But we hadn't beaten Fossil Ridge in a while. We go out there, we whooped Fossil Ridge. All right, so we go out there and destroy. So our emotions are through the roof. Vibes are high. We go back to the locker room. Coach is coming up to us. He's like, all right, we beat Fossil Ridge. There's a 3-way tie in the district. You know what it is? Hey, there's a coin flip to settle who gets into the playoffs. So we're about to go into the office right now, get this coin flip. We're coming back in here, and we're going to find out who we're playing in the playoffs. Yo, the cheerleaders come in the locker room. The parents are coming in the locker room. Everybody is celebrating because we just beat Fossil Ridge for the first time in years. Coaches come back in the locker room. Heads down. Head coach, guys, it's not good, guys. It's not good. Yeah, we're the odd man out. We didn't make it to the playoffs. And that's how our season ended. In one night, emotions through the roof to the lowest of the lowest emotions that you could feel. And that was my senior year of high school football right there, man.
They haven't figured out a better way to.
I was about to say, they still haven't updated that yet.
Look, man, I don't even think about it.
Wow.
Yeah, I cried all the way home, man. I cried in the car. It was terrible.
That's a good win, man. I mean, what a way to go out. Respectfully, what a way to go out. That's
That's good
crazy.
and bad. It was
good and bad. So when did college football become a kind of reality to you in your process?
Yeah, as I said, I didn't know that, collegiately you could even go and, get recruited and play collegiate and get a scholarship. So I remember I would get certain letters that would come to my locker, and my coaches will put these letters in there. One of my coaches, my DB coach, Byron Bundy, would be like, hey, look, North Dakota State just sent you this letter. What I need you to do is to fill this out, call this number, and then let's talk about the next steps. And I wasn't taking any of that seriously. I'm like, I'm not going to North Dakota State. Like, what are we talking about? So my whole college selection process is I was trying to get an academic scholarship, right? So I was like, I'm going to get an academic scholarship, go to a school, and then I'm going to try out for the football team. Because I figured it was the same process, just like it was in high school. Yeah, you get to high school, you try out for the football team, and you make it. So I get on an academic scholarship to go to Oklahoma State, and I figure out when the walk-on tryouts are. I didn't really have any perspective as to what walk-on and scholarship was. So here I am. I'm like, all right, walk-on tryouts are on August 15th or whatever day it was. I go out there, get a phone call from Scott Yielding, coach, and he said, hey, we were impressed by your performance, and you made the team. And I'm like, yeah, that's kind of what I expected, you know what I mean? So eventually I end up getting a scholarship, but that was after learning a football scholarship, that is. But that's after learning, like, oh, there's a vast difference between a walk-on and a scholarship student athlete. But it's just a funny story, man. I was so clueless going into college.
And sometimes they say that, right? Like that. I don't know what they like, blissful ignorance, or just kind of like that, where you could just go in and betting all on yourself. Because being a walk-on, when I read that, I was like, wow, like walking on to a D1. And even like if you haven't, like for parents that are listening or people that are going through the process, there are different levels, right? And it's probably even worse now, but like it was, you could be a walk-on, a preferred walk-on, a partial scholarship or full scholarship. You just say, hey,
gray shirt, all of it.
Y'all doing this on Tuesday? Bet I'll see y'all on Tuesday. So but kudos to you. And not just like one step in the perseverance that you use throughout life and that you're going to use kind of later on.
Yeah.
How was it? So you're going from Texas that has a culture of its own to bang bang shoot 'em up to being a cowboy in Oklahoma. How was that? There's similarities, right? Because they're close, but how was that kind of transition leaving home too, right? This is stepping out on your own.
Yeah, no, it felt good leaving home. I was always middle child, kind of did my own thing anyway, So leaving home didn't feel like anything crazy to me. But I will say, being at Oklahoma State, was an incredible experience. Absolutely loved every part of it. Mike Gundy was my head coach. We're still the head coach now, I believe, going on his 19th season. And I know you're laughing, and I know, he says a lot of stuff in the media and a lot of stuff that's out of there. But
he loves you guys, though. He truly loves his players. So that was definitely a question. Like, so there's the Oklahoma experience as a school, university, the education, and the faculty, but then there's a Coach Gundy experience, man. So give us that flavor of the locker room.
Exactly. And I tell you what, there are a lot of my teammates I noticed never really branched out of the football team, right? So it was a matter of, hey, I'm here. I know my guys. I know who I'm kicking it with. And everybody just always stayed in these circles and these cliques. And I just did not want that to be my experience. So I was very much intentional about just getting involved in different programs around the university at large. So, I loved that experience. But there was one specific group that I really was able to sink my teeth in, and that was called the Student Athlete Advisory Committee, right? I'm sure y'all are familiar with SAC. A teammate of mine, Deron Fontenot, told me one day, he was like, hey, man, we're having this meeting for SAC. We're going to have some free, Chick-fil-A nuggets. If you want to come by and grab some food real quick, nothing serious. I'm like, all right, check it out. I wanted some free food because the walk-on grind, you didn't get trading table at the time. So any opportunity that you got to get free food, we had to get it. You know what I mean? So here I am. I go to this meeting. I find out what SAC is about. I'm like, oh man, this is really interesting. In different sports, get to come together and to kind of meet about the changes that they want to see within the athletic department. This is cool. So I got involved with SAC, and then years later, eventually became the vice president of SAC and the president of SAC, and then the chair of Big 12 SAC. And throughout that entire experience, what it really taught me is, man, you have access to anybody in the country. There's like just 1 degree of separation. So I had a great mentor named Ed Stewart, who was the deputy commissioner of the Big 12 Conference. And, just kind of under his leadership and under his tutelage, he was able to get me nominated to be the Big 12 rep for National SAC, right? So speaking to student athletes across the country. And this was during a time whenever legislative autonomy was a real conversation for the Power 5 conferences and how they were going to govern themselves differently than the rest of the 32 Division I conferences. So me having the opportunity to be the voice of the Big 12 student athlete was an opportunity that I wouldn't have been able to get otherwise, right? So, because of Ed, and there was actually somebody in that position already. She was a track and field athlete at the University of Texas, but she told Ed, hey, I have to go and train for the Olympics, so you have to find somebody else to fill this seat. And he called me up and he was like, hey, would you be interested? It's like you, a guy from Texas Tech, and another guy at Baylor, and we're just going to have you guys apply. And you all are, we're going to let the student athletes vote on it. And, I ended up getting it. So, things that I wasn't even looking for, man. And that's why I always say like that divine intervention is real, because the opportunity came to me and Ed was a guy that was able to vouch for me. But that entire college experience and being a voice to the student athlete and really getting to have a look at the behind the scenes operations of the power of sport, that's the stuff that made me fall in love with not just sports, but the business of sports as well.
Absolutely. And that's what we said, a life of service, man. And that's seems like this is when you were finding it, right? You were fine-tuning and getting involved in it, and that kind of, we're gonna see that throughout the rest of the show. But so we're gonna jump into the career. This is like what we call in the game. So we're gonna talk about mostly the venture that you're doing, but I do want to pay homage and don't want to brush by all the many roles that you've had, kind of getting into this. And if there's, anything that you want to share, kind of don't be afraid to jump out. But like, your player development and I'm highlighting just some of the bigger ones, right? But like player development, for the Miami Dolphins, you work for DraftKings, you worked in agent or athlete marketing, which is kind of just synonymous of how big just that is for professionals, and just even now in NIL. With all of those things, and just like I said, there's a few other things that you've done. What do you think pulled or you learned the most from kind of going into what we're going to talk about with Vestibles?
Simple. I always narrow it down to one phrase. Anything in life worth doing is worth doing with people. And that's always what I hone it down to, because people that's the reason why I even had any of these opportunities. Whenever I graduated from Oklahoma State, I had an internship while I was at Oklahoma State, was able to get that internship because of a classmate of mine, right? Not even an athlete, just a classmate that I had, in one of my courses. And he said, hey, sponsorship marketing department is looking for more interns. Like, if you're interested, I can get you, a meeting with the guy that kind of runs it. That's how I got that opportunity. There's an opportunity that opened up with the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee. And it was because of the guidance counselor that really reached out and just said, like, hey, Yves, I think that you'd be a great fit for this. Do you think that, you should apply? I applied for it, all expenses covered, got to have an incredible experience out there in Colorado Springs. So whenever I graduated, not knowing what I was going to do next, I get a random phone call from Mike Harity, Senior Associate Athletic Director at the University of Notre Dame. And he calls me up. It was Memorial Day. I remember that too. And he just calls and he says, hey, man, I got your phone number from Ed Stewart. I was telling him that we have a role, right, in student athlete welfare and development, and we're trying to find somebody to fill the role. He threw your name out there. I just kind of wanted to talk and get to know you a little bit. So we spent 45 minutes on the phone, didn't talk about the role at all, just kind of getting to know one another. And then the next day, he sends me additional information about the role. This is on a Sunday. He just sends me all this information about what they were doing in the world of comprehensive athlete development. And I'm like, yo, Notre Dame does this better than anything that I've ever seen before. So I'm like looking up Notre Dame on the map. I didn't know where they were located. Okay, South Bend, Indiana. Okay, you know about the name, but you don't even know where they're at. So I find out about it so we get on the phone on Saturday, sends me the information on Sunday. Monday, he gets back on the phone with me. He's like, hey, did you check out the email that I sent you? I'm like, yeah, this is incredible. He goes, okay, would you want to interview with some of our staff, for the role? Tuesday, I interview with the guys, right? While I'm at Big 12 conference meetings, like the business meetings that we had. I get up early that morning to do the interview and then go on about the day. Wednesday, he gives me the call. He said, hey, the staff was impressed and we want to offer you the job. Like, will you accept it? So I'm like, absolutely. So somebody else believed in me, threw my name out to somebody, and that's how I got that role. And I'm a big believer in, like, whenever you actually get charged with a task, with a position, the most important thing that you can do is be a good steward of that. And one of the ways I see being a good steward of it is, hey, find out who your direct report is and figure out how you can make their life easier, right? So asking questions about what's giving them headaches, what's kind of keeping them up at night, and then figuring out, okay, I'm going to take on this project and I'm going to make it as smooth as possible for that person. And in turn, what they end up doing is they will vouch for you. Like, they will put their name on the line because they'll say, hey, look what Yves did for me, and look what he did for our organization and our department. So I'm doing that at Notre Dame. And then one day I'm leaving the gym and he hits me up and he goes, hey, are you going to the tennis game today? I wasn't planning on it, but if you're going to be there, yeah, I'll go and I'll meet you. He goes, okay, cool. I want to talk to you about an opportunity in the NFL. All right. Just completely random. So he goes, hey, my guy at the Dolphins reached out to me. He said they have a position that they just created. They want somebody to fill the role. I threw your name out there. Would you be interested? So, I mean, these opportunities just kept on coming by because somebody said, hey, even though I'm not in the room and I don't have any type of say in this decision, people are vouching for me. And I'm a big believer in that. Like, hey, just do good enough work that'll make people say, hey, I'll put my reputation on the line for the work that Yves is doing. And then after 5 years at the Dolphins, it was a guy named Dan Marino, Hall of Fame quarterback, who said, you know what? My agent, who was my agent since I was a rookie, I think the two of you should meet. And when you two meet, I think that, he might have something for you whenever you transition out of here. And that's how I got into athlete development space, because somebody else made a connection and vouched for me. So that's why I always say anything in life worth doing is worth doing with people.
And definitely adds to the sentiment that I usually say is, it's not what you know, it's who knows you, right? And like you said, to vouch for you in those rooms you're not in. That's awesome. Just go ahead, Mitch.
No, you mentioned the pandemic as a kind of a transition moment for you. It was a transition moment for a lot of us, but what did you do in that period of time for your next steps?
Yeah, so pandemic hits. I was a casualty of the pandemic. There were a couple of people that the team had to let go of. I was one of them. My wife got furloughed from her job, right? So the two of us are living in South Florida. We live in the middle of downtown, high rise, loving our lives, right? The beach is a 20-minute walk, like a walk run away. All the things that we love to do were just kind of like in our vicinity. We had our yoga studio, the grocery store right there. Everything was walking distance. And back to the whole spiritual aspect of it, while she was in her prayer time, in her prayer closet, God spoke to her and told her, hey, we actually need to leave South Florida and move to Texas. She had never lived in Texas, right? We met in South Florida. So here I am saying to myself, God told us to leave sunny Florida. I said, babe, that don't sound like God. That sounds like the devil. You might want to go back and recheck. So, that whole thing happens. Funny is, a couple of days later, I get the same confirmation through, in prayer. And this is on a Sunday. So between Sunday, the next day, we break our lease early, start selling a bunch of our stuff in our apartment, ship her car, pack up her car, and ship it. And then by Thursday, we were driving my car 19 hours to go from South Florida to the DFW area of Texas. So the entire thing was in the span of 4 days, guys, like all on a spiritual whim. And it was really difficult. It was really challenging because we weren't sure what the direction was and what we were, just a lot of uncertainty in life. But I remember as we were driving, my wife and I are just like laughing and smiling at each other because we're saying, look, I don't know what this future is going to hold, but we know who holds the future. So we're just, everything just felt very promising. So whenever we actually got here, we realized very quickly why we had to be in Texas because of some family things that went down. But beyond that, it allowed me time to actually write a book. So it was during that time, 2021, that I authored Immigrant American, Living an American Life with African Perspective. So I got to write the book then, which led to a ton of incredible speaking opportunities. So all of 2022, really, I was going around the country and a lot of stuff virtually as well, speaking, and spoke to a lot of different groups, whether it was immigrant organizations or universities and everything in between. So that's kind of what the pandemic looked like in my household.
I love it. And all those things put together, just all the backdrops, which you probably didn't know at that time, for you sitting in a bar and then writing a great idea on a napkin, right? So I want to start with, like, how did you and your partner, Parker Graham, you guys met in college, right? Y'all played together on
Yeah, he was an O lineman. I was a DB. Yep.
There you go. How did you guys reconnect, to come up with this idea?
Yeah. Back to the whole point of just being a good steward where you're at. We had, whenever I was at the Miami Dolphins, Parker was a wealth manager. So high net worth wealth management. He was doing that in the state of Oklahoma. And, every wealth manager, what do? They watch CNBC every day, all day, right? So he has CNBC playing in the background by his desk at all times. And one day he's looking up at the TV and he goes, "Is that Yves?" Like, so he sees me on TV on CNBC. This is 2017. And he calls me up. He goes, "Bro, I'm looking at this thing about this program that you guys created at the Dolphins. What's this about?" So, I told him about what we had created, which was called the Dolphins Business Combine, where with the endorsement of the team owner, Stephen Ross, he was able to really support the vision that we had within the player engagement department and bring up a whole bunch of our players up to New York City to get a behind the scenes look at how high level business works. And, got a ton of great introductions to Michael Rubin and, a bunch of real estate power brokers. So incredible opportunity. And, we were on NFL, we were on Good Morning America, and we were on CNBC, right? So all these features come out. And ever since that day, Parker, being in wealth management, was just like, man, that's just somebody that I want to stay in touch with. And after hearing about everything that he was doing, he was working in wealth management, but he was really about to start his own banking software company. So we just kept in touch. And we always knew that in some capacity, we wanted to work together. We just didn't know how it was going to come about. But we always talked on a regular basis. At one point, he wanted to start a podcast. I was on his podcast. But it was really in 2021. The two of us were having a conversation, July 19th, 2021. I still remember the day. And I'm sitting in the kitchen. And this is during the time where the NFL and NFLPA were negotiating a new CBA, and NIL was about to become a real thing with college sports. So all this stuff is happening around athlete empowerment. And Parker and I were just on the phone saying, man, athletes are responsible for generating so much of the sports economy, but they don't ever even get to realize their full, true value. But what if there was a way that you could help them realize their value, but actually letting the market dictate how valuable they were? And that's what sparked the idea of us creating the first of its kind athlete investment platform where fans can actually invest into the careers of athletes, and athletes get to monetize like a business can, because athletes always hear that you're a business, and fans actually get to go along on a journey and get some distributions as a part of it.
Wow. Yeah. Take us into how that works a little bit. And obviously you started about the foundation of it, but how it works and how fans and everything can get involved.
Yeah, so I can get real nerdy with it, or I can keep it high level. So I'm gonna try to keep it,
somewhere in the middle.
Somewhere in the middle. But during that same time, man, there was the Web3 craze. NFTs are going crazy. Everybody's talking about Bitcoin and all the different coins, right? And we were like, yo, we just don't know if we trust the blockchain. So we said, hey, instead of going decentralized like everybody was talking about, how about we go fully centralized and we go and we get regulated by FINRA and the SEC. So we worked on a certain type of regulation, a regulation that had only been around for not that long. And this whole process that we thought we were going to get approved to use this regulation in about 3 months, the federal government dragged it on about 10 months for us to actually get approved. But by this point, we had already started building the company out. We'd already started fundraising. We'd already started pitching and, talking to athletes and talking to agents about it. So we're getting all this money that's coming in. We're starting to work, but we don't even know if we're going to be approved to do this yet. But we're hopeful. And we went and we hired a great law team who was one of the top people at getting this type of, regulation approved. So whenever we actually found out that we got approved, we were like, oh, wow, we're going to be the first people to ever do this in this type of manner. So it's a way really for athletes to be able to, as I mentioned, monetize in the way that a company can. What we do is we have them sign an agreement. We file that agreement as its own separate business entity, right? And that agreement owns a certain percentage, an agreed upon percentage of their contract. So everything that they make while playing, a percentage of that gets paid back to the investor as a dividend, right? A distribution. And the athlete gets to keep 80% of the proceeds whenever their offering goes live. So really what we're doing is we're creating mini IPOs. It's the same way that a company goes public. We're just doing that with an athlete in their career, letting that career go public. And then stocks start to trade on our platform. And the platform is called Vestible. So you can find it in Google Play. You can find it in the App Store. It's easily accessible. And that's probably the biggest thing that we want to do. It's not just for accredited investors, people who are worth, millions and millions of dollars, but anybody who has, $100 can go in, create a profile, and also invest into the career of an athlete.
So has it become a stock market, because is it the daily trading, and I guess I'll start with that question and then I want to get into how you got your first athlete, but is it like daily trading?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. So you use the word stock market. That's exactly it, right? Instead of Google and Apple and Chevron, you'll be able to invest into the next Patrick Mahomes, the next LeBron James. And what we're doing is we're finding athletes who are early on in their careers who haven't really made that big money yet. And fans are able to come in and say like, hey, I believe this guy's going to be this. So they get to come in, invest into that athlete. And as they get the next contract, not only do my distributions go up, but the capital appreciation of that stock actually goes up as well.
Now, do you see seasonality with that, right? Like, so our football season, we're in the, first week going into week 2 football season. At that time, do you see, as you get a roster, these evaluations, certain person have a good game or things like that? Or do you think it's more long-term because of, when that person's contract is coming up? How do you envision or see that kind of working with once you get your roster of athletes?
Yeah. So I think that's the best thing is we're going to see both, right? Just like you see in the stock market, you see people who decide to buy and hold, and you also have your day traders, right? And everything in between. So I really anticipate that's what it's going to be, right? So you're going to have all kinds of investors on the platform.
So I'm gonna jump to this and then jump back to that but I want to start with tell us about your first athlete. I think a lot of people don't understand. You talk about tenure, but to get where you are today, it's been a 3-year plus process.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So kind of getting back to that perseverance. Tell us about your first IPO with your first athlete and how that went or is going, because it's been very successful and probably exceeded some of your thoughts that you had forecasted.
Yeah. So Parker and I were at the NFL Combine, and we're kind of talking to agents and letting them know about what we're doing and how we can benefit the agencies, but really how we can benefit their players as well. While we're there, I meet a guy, Eugene, and he was an agent. I go up to him because he was wearing a very unique pair of Jordan 1s. So I'm like, yo, these are really unique. I'm like, where did you get these? So I'm talking to him, and as I'm talking to him, I'm like, man, this dude looks familiar. And it clicks. I'm like, wait a minute. Hey, Eugene, was there at one point a feature about you on ESPN about how you use your faith and integrate that in the world of athlete representation. He goes, bro, that was like 15 years ago. Yeah, like that happened. I was like, yo, I knew it. I knew I remembered it because I remember seeing it. I think I watched it while I was in college. And he was like, so tell me again about your company, because I was there, but I wasn't really listening. So I'm like, yeah. So I tell him what Vestible is. And he goes, I think I have a guy that would be a perfect fit for this. I'm like, all right. So, a couple of days later, we get on a call and he's telling me about Baron Browning, outside linebacker for the Denver Broncos, played at Ohio State. He was a guy who, the other OSU, as I like to call it, right? Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State is the number one OSU that you hear of, in case you didn't know.
Let that go.
But man, I remember him saying, like, here's a guy that was playing out of position his first year in the NFL, right? He was a stand-up linebacker. But whenever they got a new defensive coordinator, they moved him to outside. And ever since then, he's had one of the fastest get-offs in the NFL. And he's found his role. Like, that's where he's supposed to be. And fans didn't really know that. Like, they weren't aware. But if you were a Broncos fan, like, you knew. So, we start talking to Baron. We fly out there to Denver to kind of sit down and meet with him and kind of tell him about the company and what we're doing. And he goes, okay, can I be the first one, though? For somebody who's like that passionate, it's like somebody who wants to be the first one and believes what we're doing. We're like, absolutely, So really, we had him as our launch athlete, and he's a guy. This is his contract year. So right, he's set to make $3.1 million. But if he goes out there and he just performs the way that he's been performing, he's set to make not north of, but up to $20 million APY on his next contract. So, working, and he ended up switching agents, during that time. So we got connected with his new agents and, kind of working with everybody within his ecosystem, including his financial advisor. So we, went and raised his offering. We knew that we had to sell a minimum of 60,000 shares at $10 a share, right? So $600,000. And we ended up raising $656,730. So we exceeded the amount that we thought we were going to raise for him. And 80% of that he gets to keep, right? He takes that, puts that in the stock market, lets that cook over the next 25 years or whatever it is. And he'll realize that, getting that money up front, just the time value of $1 is so much more valuable than getting that, in 10 years. So he gets to win in that way. The fan gets to invest. And we close his offering with a higher amount than we thought that we were going to be able to close it with. And one of the most beautiful things about it is people along the way, man, like even whenever, there was uncertainty about how this whole thing was going to go, like so many people came along and they said, hey, we back this. We believe in what you guys are doing. How can we help push this thing forward? And what ended up happening is the Associated Press picked up the story. Yahoo Sports picked up the story. Fox Business had us come on to talk about it. And a whole bunch of people have just been showing some incredible support just around this entire thing. And some of the most positive feedback that we get is whenever people organically will just come up to us and they say, yo, I had this same idea 10 years ago. I just didn't know how to execute on it. And here you guys go and actually able to put the right thing behind it. So, we just believe that timing is everything. And Parker and I, are kind of the ones with the unique backgrounds to be able to put this thing in motion.
Now, is some of your communications or is it through the agencies and representations, or is it through your player engagement contacts, and it's just kind of a combination of them all?
Yeah, everybody. Yeah, all the relationships, especially from the athlete acquisition side, it's athletes directly, and I think that's what we had to really get the first stamp of approval. Whenever it was just an idea, we went and we spoke to no less than 100 athletes.
Oh wow!
Yeah, we had to see is this something that y'all want? Like, do you think this is a good idea? Both football, basketball, and then we actually went to women's soccer and talked to those athletes as well, just kind of get their thoughts. The women athletes really love this. They're like, hey, they see this as the great equalizer, especially whenever it comes to pay. And we're going to be activating women athletes, later on. But after talking to all the athletes, the resounding feedback that we got was, this is a dope idea. Like, go talk to my business manager, talk to my agent, talk to my financial advisor. How is it that we can make this thing happen? So that was really encouraging for us.
So how is the education portion coming of it, right? Like, because, you feel, well, one, there's multiple levels, right? But like the financial literacy is a really big gap in the culture, right? Yeah. So for our culture, but then for athletes too, right? Because we've seen the Broke documentary where these athletes get, in these situations where after they're playing, they're not set up. And then you get the scam aspect of it, right? Because these money managers or these people like, oh, I got ideas to get you into. Like, how is that educational factor? And I'm pretty sure that's one of the biggest things on your plate.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely the biggest thing on both sides, with the athlete side as well as just the consumer, right, and the fan, the investor. That's probably what we spend a lot of, especially preliminary, right? It's just like educating them on what it actually is, and really to that point of the financial education of it. It's whenever I was a student athlete in college. I think I told you the story, EJ, whenever we first met. I remember being down there on the football field and looking at my teammates and being like, man, roughly 70% of us are Black. But why does it seem like the ones that are benefiting the most from what we're doing down here, like none of them look like us? Whether it's the offensive and defensive coordinator, the head coach, the people who are up in the suites, the ones who have the best seats, all the corporate partners. Seems like everybody is old and everybody is white. I was like, what's going on? Right. And it's no resentment, right? Like, you're like, hey, I'm glad that everybody gets to eat off of this, but like, how is it that I can benefit off of this too? So whenever we started creating Vestible, that's also what was in my mind, because I was thinking to myself, hey, look, we want everybody to be able to benefit, everybody to enjoy this journey. But instead of you getting a cut and I don't get anything, you get to invest in this thing that I own, right, that I'm a part of. And now we both get to benefit and we get to go on this journey together, right? So from that standpoint, we're living in a generation right now where the young athletes and really just Gen Z in general are the ones who are the biggest investors that we've ever seen in the history of the U.S., right? So they're using apps like Robinhood, they're on E-Trade, they're using all this stuff, and they want to get
funding. They're doing crowdfunding, right? And they're understanding that stuff for albums and the things that they're interested in. Yeah,
absolutely. So with all these things already happening, we're like, hey, you're already learning about stocks, you're learning about investing, right? So here's this thing that essentially turns you into a stock, right? And now you get to say like, hey, it's almost in a way that instead of looking into things in businesses and companies where, maybe you're not looking at their quarterly statements, but you really understand ball and you really understand sports. So it's almost like a way to actually use financial literacy, but it's around something that you're already really, really interested in and that you know how to actually value from a monetary standpoint.
I love all of this, man. And like, it's tough because, we have a short amount of time. And I'm thinking about something I'm going to pitch to you once we get off the air to see if you're open about it. Because like you said, this is new. This is something that hasn't been done. It's giving the access, right? Like you said, you don't have to be an accredited investor, which some people don't even know, what that means, right? So it gets everybody kind of in the game in a great way that's monetizing, right? Because we see now that the NFL is starting to look at private equity. NFL is one of the last, major sports leagues to do that. And that's just kind of like the stamp. Like if the Shield's doing it, there must be some things kind of heading towards that. So I think all of this, like you said earlier, is timing. So definitely want to move forward, man. But I definitely geek out because I'm definitely on the money side of things. But MH, man, you got those quick hits?
I do. Just some quick hits, yes or no, this or that type of questions.
Okay.
For our listeners. Text or call?
Call.
Pancakes or waffles?
Pancakes.
Apple or Android?
Come on now. Hey, if you have an Android, do not talk to me, please. Apple.
Early bird gets the worm or late night grind?
Early bird all day.
Breakfast or dinner?
Dinner.
Kevin Hart or Cat Williams?
Man. He said, damn.
Let's go Kevin Hart.
Okay. You rather be a hero or villain?
I don't want to be a villain. Yeah, give me the hero.
Play it safe and go into overtime or risk it and win it in regulation?
No, you got to risk it.
Okay. One track that never gets old for you, music.
Promises by Maverick City Music.
Got it. Oklahoma State legends here. Thurman Thomas or Barry Sanders?
Ooh, why are you making me pick against my guys, man? But you got to go with the GOAT, greatest running back of all time.
You got to.
Yeah, it's Barry Sanders.
We'll close with that one, EJ.
I love it. I love it. I was waiting for that one. Okay, I got one, man, just to toss in there. So, jollof rice, man. Which country has the best jollof rice? If you know, that's really big in Africa, and there's different talks about that. What's the best that you've had?
Man, you trying to start World War III over here, man. When it comes to jollof, the big conversation is really around Ghana and Nigeria, right? And every country has their own variations, but I think those are the top two. And I've had both, and I've had a lot of both. Man, I think you got to go with the Ghanaians, man. I think Ghanaians they do it better than the Nigerians. And I got a lot of Nigerian friends who hate when I say that, and I will tell them to their face and run right when I say it. But yeah, man, Ghana has the best jollof.
I love it.
Yeah, Auntie gonna hear this, so we'll have to hit up Auntie on this one. I know
for sure.
Yeah.
All right, man. Hey, so thank you for that. We're jumping into the winner's circle. We definitely love to have this as a platform. We just talk about, some of the future endeavors and some things that you got going on. We won't spend too much time on the book because you have talked about it throughout, but it's among your many steps, to be an author, right? Like it's one of the bucket lists on many people's agenda. And then you talked about the time you wrote it, but what inspired you to write it?
Yeah, I always knew that I wanted to write a book. Didn't necessarily know what it was going to be about. But one of the things that my wife and I did during the pandemic actually is we had a date night where we sat down in the living room and she and I both just wrote a list of, different gifts that we had. We were doing Bible study and we were really stuck on this verse, which said, and your gift shall make room for you and put you in the presence of great men. So we kept meditating on that. And one of our date night activities was to just write whatever gifts that we thought that we had. So I read all mine to her. She read hers to mine, or to me. And then we were adding on each other's list, right? It's like, oh, you're also really good at this, or you're good at that. And a lot of my themes were around storytelling and writing and just unique perspectives, things of that nature. And it just like all these just were the ingredients for writing a book, right? And as I'm looking at this stuff, and I'm just like, man, the time is now. Like I have to do this now because when else was I going to be able to do it? And here's one of the craziest things that just confirmed it all. One of my college roommate hits me up out of the blue. I'm talking completely out of nowhere. I took a screenshot of this. And he said, hey, Kelsey and I were talking. Kelsey's his wife. And we just decided that you're the best storyteller that we know. Bro, out of the blue, like completely out of nowhere. And I don't believe in coincidences. So I get that text message and I'm like, oh yeah, that's confirmation. I appreciate it, God. And that's when that's how it started, man. I started writing it. I devoted 6 hours a day, every single day, in the mornings to actually writing. So I used to do that. Well, not every day, 6 days a week. And then, I took Sundays off. So did that every single day. And after about 6 months, the writing itself was done. And then everything else came into play afterwards, right? Where we're talking to an editor and we're trying to make sure that it's formatted the right way and getting a couple of people to read it over and over and over again. And after about 9 months, the book was published, self-published it. So yeah, the entire process was pretty quick, but it took a lot of discipline for writing 6 hours a day.
Absolutely. So the book is called Immigrant American Living in American Life While African Perspectives. Mm-hmm. So give us one reason we should go read it besides hearing your story. Because, like you said, you gave us the Reader's Digest version in the early, but, you devolved a little more. But give us another reason why we should read it.
Yeah, I mean, I would say one of the biggest things is, you find like there's so many commonalities with people who may be different than you, whether you're somebody who is, naturally born American, or if you're somebody that is an immigrant, and no matter what type of immigrant and what country you may come from. One of my old teammates actually came up to me after he finished it. He goes, bro, this should be required reading for everybody that comes into this country. His words, right? And, after having written it, one of my favorite chapters, I believe, was chapter 9, where I go back and I talk about the experience after I went back to Africa for the first time, after I graduated college and going on this mission trip. And really finding a lot of inspiration from the people who are in some of the worst circumstances in the slums of Nairobi, Kenya, who face the drudgery of the world every day over and over and over again. But as I was having a conversation with a guy in the slums, he says, every single day we don't know where our help is going to come from, but we pray to God, and He sends people like you that come along the way to help us out. And things that even as to talk about it, almost brings a tear to my eye, and you get perspectives of what other people of the world are going through, and you can't help but just feel immense gratitude for being in this country. And this country has a lot of problems, and we talk about the problems, especially whenever you're Black. I think you experience the problems differently than many other races do. But even in that, there's so much beauty in just being in America, and I think you get a different appreciation for this country that you're in. Whenever you read a book like Immigrant American.
Man, I love that, man. You have something, MH?
No, go ahead.
I want to jump into another thing. Back into the service. That's how we open.
Mm-hmm.
And even though you, for life reasons, you guys were avoiding a conflict and a war, you really have been stated and quoted that you want to give back to the Congo, and you want it to be a representative of like sports, and you want to build the sports dynamic and that connection for them to be great athletes and to be involved in this like worldly games, whether it's football or whatever sports. Even though that's in the back of the mind, how are you continually working on that? Because like the last thing we know about sports there is the what was it, the 1974, the big fight. Like that's the rumble in the jungle, right? That's the biggest sporting thing that we know. And there's been too far along without it having, some other major impact,
Yeah. No, EJ, man, great research, man. Appreciate this question. Congo and Zaire was once upon a time one of the fastest rising countries in the world and developing really quickly. In the 1970s, for them to be able to get the greatest sporting event in the world is what it was called at that time. George Foreman versus Muhammad Ali coming to Kinshasa to fight. There was a lot of pride in being from Congo. Mobutu Sese Seko was the president, and he did things differently. He didn't even wear a tie. He wore a different type of suit. He had a leopard hat that he wore, like a lot of flavor. Congo is known for the type of music, the type of dancing that we do. And there was a lot of immense pride in being from Congo. And years of having the same president, things fell apart really quickly. Whenever I went back to the country in 2018 and then again in 2021, it's actually really sad to walk in the same streets that I remember whenever I was 6 and 7 years old and seeing that they're worse off now than they were back then. So for me, the mindset is always all roads lead back to Congo. All roads lead back to Africa. No matter what it is that I do in this business, Vestible, we go and we build this thing out and it grows and it becomes immensely successful. I'm always going to try to find a way to, help Congolese people. And there's a great Congolese community here in Texas, actually, which is incredible. And I always just want to foster more and more relationships for us to be able to work together and go back. So a good friend of mine, Danny Mulenda, has a company that he just launched called Congo Tech. And we're going to go back to Kinshasa and we're going to really teach some technical skills to kids and teenagers who are in Congo and want to get into the tech space, right? So whatever it is that I'm using right now, man, I always say that I want to be of service where my feet are planted, and I always want to be in service to Congo, right? So, hey, where I'm at with what I have in my hand here in the DFW area, I serve, really involved in my church and in the community. And I'm always going to find a way to, to bring my Congolese people along the journey as well.
Unbelievable, man. I'm good, AJ. I got my shout outs to you, man. This has been unbelievable, like lost for words. And then I wanted to also and shout out just the praying wife and the praying woman, what that does to your life, man. So shout out to your wife. I know my wife is a big piece of me too. So shout out to I noticed you mentioned her a lot through this conversation, so I definitely wanted to shout her out.
Yeah, I got to add, chapter 10 of my book is called The Dawn of Eve. So my name is Eve. My wife's name is Dawn. And
I love that.
Yeah, right? Pretty crazy.
That's cool. Yeah.
Let's go. The wordplay.
Yeah.
We did talk about, the importance of money. And I just believe that along with this tool, I hope that financial literacy part comes, in play with it lockstep as a part of your marketing, because that's really a big gap. But between the book and what you're doing, financially, like talking about the things that people should be involved with, like the Buffalo Bills bond, right? Where people are learning that like they can invest in the Buffalo Bills stadium coming up here in a couple of weeks, and things like that. Do you believe that you're ever going to get into that speaking role, like taking the book, the speaking stuff you've done? You had a podcast called, was it Good Evening, which was a play on the spelling of your name, like Eve, evening. Do you see yourself kind of getting back into that, forefront? Because you have a lot on your plate with Vestible, I understand. But just that narrative of kind of communicating, authoring, or teaching.
Yeah, at one point I was trying to balance it all, and then I decided, I'm like, hey, let me let go of everything right now and just go full in, just all in on Vestible, right? I think I have to have the blinders on during this time, especially in the period of the company that we're in. We've hired, right? We have a staff. We have 9 people on staff and probably about 13 contractors as well, right? So whenever you get to a point where you're responsible for people's livelihoods and you're paying them, and they're getting a paycheck every single 2 weeks, I think I owe it to our team to be all in on what we are building as a company. So that's where all of my focus is right now. But please believe that I have, a plan in the future. And I always say, man, many are the plans of a man, but it's the Lord that directs his steps. So I still have a plan in the future of really taking all of my experiences and bring in especially people who are in underrepresented communities along the way on a journey. Because I always say, man, we all we got. Like, if we're not going to help each other out, who's gonna help us out, right? So our team right now, if you look in the world of tech, in the world of FinTech, probably one of the most diverse teams that you're ever going to see. That's awesome. And if anybody wants to dig in, you can kind of go and look at our staff. But between racial diversity and gender diversity and socioeconomic backgrounds, like, we have everything. But right now, all the focus is definitely just on Vestible and building this thing out.
Love it. All right, as we getting out of here, we usually ask for a coaching gym, or what we call the assist. But you've been doing that all three out. But if you got another one, man, if you can leave us with, it's either a quote, words to live by, it could be a scripture, or something you would tell your younger self. But just give us that quick quote or scripture.
Man, I'll give you a scripture. Here we go. Matthew 6:33 through 34, which says, "But seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added on to you. Therefore, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself." Focus on today, because today has enough troubles of its own, right? So that's the 2 verses brought in together. And the reason why I love that so much is because I think we live in a day and age where so many people are worried, right? People worry all the time, but I just believe in, give us our daily bread, right? It's daily bread, because I need faith to be renewed every single day. I can't think about tomorrow too much. If he clothes the lilies with beauty and splendor, how much more will he give you? So that's what I stick to right there, man. It's just, I'm going to seek God and his kingdom every single day, and everything that I need is going to be given to me. And, the best part about the future is that God is already there. All I have to do is step into it.
Let's go. The doors of the church are open, man. MH, please hit us with the final thoughts, man.
Yeah, he's already there in the future, man. I love that, man. I just appreciate you, E, man. This has been unbelievable, man. I know our listeners are getting blessed with this, and then, obviously we love to support your business, and shout out to you for breaking ground there. That's unbelievable. So thanks for your time, man.
Thank you.
Yeah, Yves, we're going to put this in the show notes, but just so they can hear it audibly, please give your where they can download, your Instagram, the company Instagram. Go ahead and shout those out so they can hear it audibly, but we will be putting this in the show notes.
Yeah, so everything is Vestible, VESTIBLE, because we're turning things into investable assets. So you can go to vestible.co. You can go on our IG, which is vestibleco, or vestibule.co on IG as well. And then on Twitter, it's Vestible Co. We're also pretty active on LinkedIn too. So Vestible and anything. If you just Google Vestible, you'll see us pop up, man. Our SEO has been working wonders right now.
Fantastic. Hey, man, Yves, thank you so much, man. Like, from, I got some ideas. I'm going to talk to you offline. So once again, we always like to thank our guests for taking time out of their schedule to bless you with the little more insight of them and just the knowledge, right? Because there's different things that you can do in sports. So we hope you enjoyed this show. As you know, new shows dropping every Thursday. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, right? Because visual representation matters. If you see it, you can be it. We have audio shows on all platforms. So you can even say, hey, Alexa, play Black in Sports. I hope that kicks on your Alexa in the background. But no, please stay safe, practice gratitude, and no, we're rooting for you.
Screaming, all us blacks got is sports and entertainment until we even.
Assuming I'm rooting for everybody that's black. Yeah. Yeah. Assuming I'm rooting for everybody that's black. Yo. Look. Assuming I'm rooting for everybody that's black. Spent about 2 racks on handmade new rags. Assuming I'm rooting for everybody that's black. That's everybody from sports to college class to rap.